I was folding laundry in the sunlit corner of the living room when I noticed the ping on my sister's phone. A notification, bright and unmistakable. She glanced at it and smiled, not a quiet, polite smile, but the kind that stretches just enough to show triumph. My parents were standing nearby. My mother's eyes flicked to the phone, then to me with a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk. "Hair," my sister said, waving the screen in my direction. "Wes, who just got paid." I paused mid-folding, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "Wait, paid? For what?" "You did all the garden work last weekend," I said slowly, gesturing to the neatly raked beds and the freshly trimmed hedges. "And Mom." My mother leaned back against the doorway, arms crossed. "Your family," she said, voice almost amused. "You work for free." The words landed like a quiet, cold slap. I stared at the folded laundry in my hands, the sound of the wind brushing through the curtains, the faint hum of the refrigerator. My sister smirked again, a little more pointedly. "Maybe you're just not worth it," she added, the kind of casual cruelty that makes its own echo. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't even look at them. I folded the last piece of laundry, set it neatly aside, and walked out of the house. The street outside was warm, quiet, empty. I kept my pace slow, not rushing, not fleeing. I just left. The act itself was small, inconspicuous, but it was my first wordless assertion of boundaries. I didn't know it yet, but it would mark the beginning of something subtle, almost invisible, yet powerful. Over the next few days, I replayed the scene in my mind. I thought about every other time I'd been overlooked, the times my achievements were dismissed as expected, the chores and favors that disappeared into the background of family life, the unspoken comparisons that had hung over me like a shadow since childhood. I realized I'd never asked to be paid or acknowledged, not because it wasn't deserved, but because I'd been trained to believe family always comes first, and that my value was assumed. And now that assumption had been weaponized against me. I did not call them. I did not plead or demand. I simply did my work elsewhere, quietly, professionally, independently. I applied for a freelance project I had long been hesitant to pursue, something in my field that my parents had always considered hobby work. Days later, the confirmation email arrived. A contract, generous and formal. Payment guaranteed upon completion. The irony was not lost on me. A task I had quietly cultivated on my own, unnoticed and underappreciated by my family, now generated tangible, undeniable value. The same skills that had been assumed, taken for granted, they were suddenly recognized by someone who had no emotional or familial stake, someone who could, quite simply, pay me what I was worth. When I returned home that evening, I carried nothing but the quiet weight of that realization. My sister was still scrolling on her phone, waiting for another notification that might make her feel victorious. My parents asked about the project casually, the way people ask about the weather, not expecting anything beyond a brief summary. I smiled slightly. Not triumphantly, not vindictively. Just a small, internal acknowledgement the value I had always had did not depend on their recognition. I didn't flaunt the contract. I didn't confront my sister. I simply existed in the knowledge that the balance had shifted, imperceptibly yet undeniably. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic at home changed in subtle ways. Requests for help were met with polite refusal or delayed responses, not out of pettiness, but out of quiet calculation. I had not shouted, I had not demanded, I had merely demonstrated that my contributions were not bound by obligation alone. That quiet authority was enough. My sister noticed it first, of course. The smugness in her smile dimmed slightly when I declined a chore, citing my own commitments. She tried the playful mockery once, but it felt hollow even to her. My parents never commented. They continued their routines, but there was a small, invisible shift. They realized that while they could not dictate my worth, they could witness it. I reflected on that, often the difference between assumed value and earned recognition. I didn't need approval or gratitude to validate myself, but the world, outside the narrow circle of familial expectation, could confirm what had always been true. My worth was my own. The story did not end with a confrontation or a declaration. It ended with quiet confidence, with measured authority. I maintained my contributions when I chose, for the people and projects I valued, not for obligation or inherited expectation. I learned to navigate the delicate tension of family life while asserting my own boundaries, and I did so without drama, without spectacle, laden revenge. And the most unbelievable part. It was astonishing only because it had been so simple. I had left the house, let silence do the talking, and then let the world outside acknowledge what my family had refused to. I didn't need to prove myself to them. I proved myself to myself, and that, in turn, reshaped how the family saw me, slowly, subtly, irreversibly. Sometimes my sister still glances at me with something like caution in her eyes. My parents still look for ways to measure value in the ways they understand. But I have learned that recognition does not need to come from them. The quiet shift of leverage, of authority, of respect is enough. And the knowledge that I do not need to shout to claim it is more powerful than any payment notification ever could be. In the end, the moment that felt like dismissal, the scoff, the smirk, the unpaid labor, became the hinge on which everything turned. I walked away, and when I returned, I was already elsewhere in control, measured and unshakable. No words were necessary. Sometimes silence is not absence. Sometimes it is the loudest, most undeniable form of authority.